They say silence is golden, but in the context of marriage, silence can be devastatingly painful. Hello, I'm your host, Jean-Paul Barat, President of Focus on the Family Canada. Welcome to the Thriving Family, a Focus on the Family Canada podcast. The Thriving Family podcast is made possible by generous donors who support our ministry. In this season of the podcast, we're talking about communication and conflict, which is one of the most common topics people come to us about. There's a lot you can say about saying nothing, since silence can be used both constructively and destructively in a relationship. It's important we understand what's going on behind the silence. Today's episode, Silent Storm, When Your Spouse Won't Talk, can help guide us through this challenging path. We'll look at the negative sides of silence, how silence can be used for good, and how to decipher between good and bad silence in a marriage. Just a note, referrals to websites not produced by Focus on the Family Canada do not necessarily constitute blanket endorsements of the site's content. Let's begin.
Why do couples buckle down in silence? And what are they saying through their silence? Sometimes it can be a mere personality trait, but it also can be a symptom of something far more significant. Counselor Dave Ortiz says that negative silence can sometimes be related to one's emotional quotient, which asks, how do you deal with yourself and others? Let's look at it this way. Imagine if you genuinely don't like the way your husband parts his hair, but can't figure out why this bothers you. Maybe it reminds you of the way an abusive figure parted his hair. If that's the case, you may retreat into silence, but you're unwilling to ask yourself what's contributing to this silence. Without this self-awareness, you aren't able to properly deal with your own emotions. But rest assured, this isn't all doom and gloom. As with most things, silence can be used both positively and negatively. First, we will look at 7 scenarios Ortiz describes where silence can be highly destructive, both to the marital relationship and to the silent partner. Then we will look at the ways silence can build and enrich your relationship. First, let's identify how silence can be unhealthy in marriage. Scenario 1. Passive aggression. Silence can sometimes be an act of quiet hostility. In other words, a spouse will act as though they're cooperating, but silently will do everything they can to sabotage a situation. For example, one spouse may agree that it's a good idea to visit the in-laws for the weekend, but then will sulk the entire time they're visiting. Scenario 2. Safety. Abuse comes in many forms: verbal, social, emotional, physical, sexual, or economical. When any sort of abuse is feared, silence can be used as a buffer for the victim. In Ortiz's words, silence becomes safe, so the victim thinks they'd better keep quiet rather than say something that could incur wrath. Scenario 3. Avoidance. This can be related to passive aggression, but without the feeling of hostility. It's a way of saying you don't want to talk about the issue because it's uncomfortable and don't want to hurt your spouse's feelings, so you avoid the topic altogether. Ortiz describes this as a dance, where couples have learned what to say and what to avoid, which helps to minimize fights. He adds that while silent avoidance generally isn't a healthy form of communication, it can sometimes be used in the short term to avoid fights over petty things which may not necessarily be worthy of a fight. Scenario 4. Peace at all costs. Ortiz describes this as a codependent stance, adding that it's prevalent when one partner discovers the other spouse has a destructive habit but doesn't know how to address the issue at hand. Ortiz explains that the innocent spouse is not confronting the issue, thereby enabling an at-fault spouse by not saying anything. Scenario 5. Busyness. When you and your spouse busy yourselves with the noise of being hyper-connected, for example, phones, computers, and social media, you run the risk of being taken away from the present moment and confronting whatever issues are in front of you. Ortiz offers a practical solution. The Sabbath is meant to get us to stop and reflect on where we're at in the relationship to ourselves, others, and the world. This takes time and discipline, but leads to rest. Scenario 6. Power. This is a form of emotional abuse, manipulating the victim into feeling as though they've done something wrong. For example, The silent spouse gives their partner the cold shoulder and waits until their partner comes to sweet-talk them out of their mood. This is where silence gets cooperation, Ortis says. Scenario 7. Rumination. Here's why Ortis cautions against dwelling on your unfortunate circumstances. He explains, when we ruminate, we are making the rest of the world revolve around us, and believe the world needs to do something in order to make us happy. Rather than seeing what positive options you can explore with your spouse, you'd rather ruminate in your own misery. That can lead to bitterness, which is cancer of the soul. Strategy 1. Processing. Rather than reacting to a situation, silently think things through so that you can see the circumstances more objectively. Sometimes our impulsivity can get us into more trouble than what's necessary. Strategy 2. Reflection and empathy. When two people get married, it's usually a collision of two cultures. If one of you came from an upbringing with family solidarity and the other came from a dysfunctional or abusive family, the spouse from the healthier family will have a difficult time understanding their partner's destructive family background. For example, if you have a phrase you use, like, gosh darn, that's just a simple expression. Your spouse may have heard that from their father before he beat them. Gosh darn, this hurts me more than you. So it's important to have patience in that context and understand that you may need to change your words. Strategy 3. Solitude. Ortis says that there are 3 people in every marriage: you, me, and us. Without taking time for solitude and keeping tabs on your emotional health, you run the risk of burnout, which can take a toll on your marriage. If the individual parts aren't healthy, the collective us won't be healthy. Strategy 4. Meditation. This one is simple. Ortis cites Psalm 46, verse 10 as a biblical mandate for using silence as a means towards spiritual maturity. Be still and know that I am God. Strategy 5. Enjoyment. Remember that being in the presence of your spouse doesn't necessarily mean you need to have a conversation all the time. It's okay to just sit in silence and then verbally connect later on. Since silence can be used both constructively and destructively in a relationship, how do you decipher your own behavior? Ortis says that communication can always be improved by having honest conversations and listening to one another. Our spouses don't always need to fix their problems, but they need us to listen. Understand that communication styles are different, and learn to respect each other's communication patterns. Another way you can gain a better understanding of your spouse's silence is through asking open-ended questions. The question why in a relationship is often felt as a judgment, especially if you're feeling pretty raw in your silence. If they ask you, "Why did I do that?" you may feel it as a judgment that you did something wrong. If they instead ask, "What were you feeling?" your answer helps get an understanding of the issue rather than trying to explain something your spouse doesn't necessarily understand.
If you feel unsure about how to navigate silence in your marriage, or if you believe you are a victim of any form of abuse, please know that we are here for you, and your well-being is important to Focus on the Family Canada and to our God. In the show notes, you'll find links to 2 resources on abuse. First, there is the free PDF booklet called Understanding Abuse, and the other is the video series with counselor Darby Strickland called Understanding Abuse in Marriage. Both resources are crucial for identifying and beginning to heal from abuse in relationships. If you wish to talk about this further, or if it brought up something that you would like to talk through, you can have a free one-time consultation with one of our registered counselors at Focus on the Family Canada over the phone. Give us a call at 1-800-661-9800 to request a consult. It's our gift to you. Thanks for listening to today's episode of The Thriving Family, a podcast from Focus on the Family Canada. If you like this episode, please leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts, and be sure to subscribe. If you feel led, you can make a donation at focusonthefamilycanada.ca/podcast giving. This program is available ad-free because of the generosity of our donors. Most importantly, please remember that we are here for you and your family.